the News of the World newspaper. You'll recall News Corp recently closed down that then 168-year-old tabloid after accusations that staffers hacked the voicemail accounts of people whom they were covering.
What made you decide you were going to be the one who's going to hack into the iPhone?
Spanish police have arrested 4 people suspected of being members of the anonymous computer hacking ring.
That when the government shuts down the internet, that's when it's time to shut down the government.
There's still a belief that hacking is a bad thing that is done by bad people who are trying to break into closed systems to do bad things, you know, to steal money or to change information and ruin people's lives.
Here are the hackers.
We will hack! We will hack! We will hack!
I mean, language is is a very fluid, evolving thing. So hacker is one of these words that probably will ultimately separate into 2 different words, but it's taken this path of the sort of constructive hacker, and then there's I think probably in the popular view, it's taken more the destructive hacker who hacks into your bank account or something.
Okay, you know a certain bank is insecure when they've got in, or you know a certain computer games company runs an insecure server. I think they enjoy the mischief making involved in showing up the insecurities.
The original concept of hacking, in fact, it goes back to a tradition that came out of MIT, and it was about students who were making things do something that they weren't intended to do.
Comprised of engineering students and model train enthusiasts of all ages, the purpose of the club was to challenge and modify the functional design of model trains in order to hack a better train.
I kind of get annoyed with people thinking that hacking is something evil, and that is completely wrong.
They defined a hacker as one who applies ingenuity to create a clever result called a hack.
Hackspace in Brighton has had huge debates about whether to call itself a hackspace because of the negative kind of press against the word hacking as around the word hacking, especially from the phone hacking kind of issues and things. So it's a problematic, loaded word.
Hacking happens as it happens because of a necessity.
I mean, there's just a human need for sort of solving problems in small groups.
Still in existence today, the Tech Model Railroad Club remains proud that it originated the word hacker and disapproves using the term to represent illegal acts of computer crimes.
In some ways a tribute to the sort of stubbornness of the constructive hackers that they've stuck to their label. They say, well, this is our label and we're going to keep it, not change to something else.
Hacking for me is just people who are just curious, love technology, pull things apart, put things together, work together, and just being inventive with the technology they have.
Lots of people want to call their hack days appathons or developer events, or they just do everything they can to avoid the word hack. I personally don't go along with that. I think that we need to bring back the hack, we need to celebrate the word, and we just need to make sure that people understand it.
Tech Meetups is running something called a Be My App mobile app hackathon. This time around, the same hackathon is actually happening in 6 cities. People come on a Friday evening with an app idea, and they pitch that app idea to a crowd and they say, this is why it's going to be great, these are my skills, these are the skills I'm looking for in other team members, let's try and hack something together.
Hackers in New York, hackers with a fork, hackers coming out, getting ready to shout, staying up all night and we keep our minds bright, pants are back, but the code is tight.
Hack day events are usually on the weekend. I think it's quite important to have it on the weekend because then it's free for anybody to turn up. It's not just the people who work in that particular area that get to show up. People come in for breakfast. All the hackers get very well fed, so there's coffee and muffins and things like that, and that really sets them up for the day. The beginning part of a hack day is a kind of a really nice golden time for people to get together, come together in teams, shape different ideas, and then there'll be a series of pitches. Pitches are more, they're not really kind of company sales pitches, or at least they shouldn't be. It's more about getting people excited about what tools and laying the foundations for things that might come. Then we usually, people are free to get started. If they've got an idea, they can shun all of that stuff. They can just get working and find a table and do that. But typically we would then have lunch, and then the real hacking starts at 2:00.
Not quite mental gymnastics, but it's about trying new things and sort of seeing if something works and testing out new tools that you might not normally get a chance to, or testing out new ideas that you might not normally get a chance to.
The hacking time is really from 2:00 till 2:00 the next day, so it's this 24-hour period, and there's a lot of most people probably haven't even formulated their ideas by 7:00, but a lot of people will have formed teams, gone away, and then just been working solidly.
StarJar is an app to reward good behaviour in children when you're out and about on your mobile. The idea is that to collect as many stars, and they all contribute towards a bigger prize, which could be a trip to the park, a trip to the cinema.
Music is the app that we've built. Music to your news. The whole idea is it's music curation based on the news that you're reading.
Most of the time, you're not bringing to the table something that's mission critical and has to be done tomorrow, but you're bringing to the table something you're interested in, something you want to advance, and you've never really had time to get to. But all of a sudden, here you are in a big group of people thinking in similar ways, and you get a chance to work on it. So people tend to come to it generous to begin with, and they tend to bring things that are still so nascent that it's difficult not to trust people, Your ideas, when you come to something like this, are so new that you're not even sure if they want to be protected, even if you're very careful about it.
It's conceptualized by some people as open innovation. You just share as much as you can, and then whoever's in the best place to exploit it can do that, and then we can maybe share the benefit.
We tend to have this idea from business that if you have a good idea, you have to protect it, and you have to keep it secret, and file the patents and file the trademarks and all that. But I think that actually stifles creativity and stifles progress a lot of times, because you get your best ideas when you share them with other people, because they give you feedback, they add their ideas to it. And so I think this idea of being promiscuous with your ideas, you end up ultimately growing better ones from them.
I think that's probably a good route to success, and it certainly helps us collaborate. If we were completely protective of our intellectual property, I think we wouldn't share anything, and then we just stay home.
The thing is, hack days and events like them are usually designed to be places where you're surrounded by people with similar interests, some similar skills, and some ideally skills that are different than yours that you want to learn and that they want to teach. And I think it tends to be a very safe environment.
So sort of meeting developers who you know and working together on sort of a project that's completely different from what you all do during your working life. So it's kind of almost a release and a sort of a place for playing. If you sort of talk to any people who've really achieved anything in pretty much any field, whether they're an artist, a scientist, or a product designer or whatever, their great moment of breakthrough hasn't come when somebody has sat in front of them with a brief and said, you've got 48 hours to come up with an idea. You might come up with a really interesting and fun idea, but it isn't the whole solution.
I've met some great guys, great girls. I think I've spoken to pretty much everyone in the room. If I haven't, I've waved at you. Thanks for your support. I think a lot of people like my idea. And I think tonight I'm blown away, to be honest, but some great apps, great ideas, and delivered.
I think it's it's a little bit controversial because, your product or the thing that you've built might not be pretty, the code might be awful, but it does the thing you wanted to do, or bits of the thing you want to do, and the idea might be brilliant, and it might just take you an extra 6 hours to finish off the hack. So I think it's difficult to judge the quality of the work. It really depends on the group dynamic, on who's been involved, who's working on it, who's on the sidelines. Yeah.
The judges will basically look at the innovation of their app. They will look at how they've been executing this. They'll look at how sticky their app is in terms of keeping users, and also the market potential. And this criteria actually allows a business case to be put forward for that app. So there are people who actually launch their businesses out of these events.
The less fun side of it is we have this business problem. We know developers are quite good at solving problems. Let's pay a few less than their normal day rate on a weekend to fix our problems for us. And I think that's the sort of thing that will kill Hackdays stone dead. It certainly does for me to a certain extent.
We got together a really strong team. We went to the pub, had a few beers, we threw around some ideas. We came up with a bit of an action plan. Then we got in this morning, met up for some breakfast first, came into the office and had a bit of a crisis because we identified a potential competitor that some people thought was a challenge to the innovation level.
What concerns me in some cases around this is that, you know, everyone has this notion about things like Facebook where it's like, if you're not paying, you're the product. And it kind of feels like hackathons like this are turning developers into products, and that the people who are benefiting are either large firms or who could afford to pay for R&D, or venture capital firms. And VCs kind of always do this sort of thing where they pick teams or they help assemble teams and they make, you know, to a greater or lesser extent, low-cost prototypes into businesses. But it feels like a cheapening of developer value to me.
We have a steering group, and they are the ones that are kind of in charge of making sure that we do look after the developers as well. And we have a general rule, which is that during the course of the year, we will run 50% of hack days which are commercial, which are more like work, and then 50% of ones which are more like fun.
These hack days and spaces allow people also to come, meet you in person, invite you a beer.
The lovely thing about hackathons is the social aspect. There are loads of people who I'd never met unless it was through sort of hack days.
It will also allow you to be more social because you will have to talk to different people.
With non-technical communities, you need to be able to sell the benefit to the members of the community for involvement. They're not going to get engaged just because it's cool technology.
I wonder how new it is, though.
Telephone transmitter that led Edison to his most startling invention. He suspected that a vibrating needle point would leave indentations on a piece of paper, indentations that could then be played back.
It all took place in about 1903, when the incumbent telegraph industry, people sending telegrams over cables, suddenly got very upset at the thought that their industry might be usurped by radio, by sending dots and dashes over the air. It's known as the masculine affair to those who know about telecoms, and Guglielmo Marconi in Italy had built his system up, demonstrated that he could send a transatlantic Morse code just in demonstrations to his own employees, with his own employees. He hadn't done it publicly, and there was to be a very big demonstration at the Royal Institution in London, which would be widely reported, showing the public in June 1903 that it was also possible with a 300-mile link from Cornwall to London. And the telegraph industry saw a way of embarrassing Marconi and showing up the insecurity of his system by interfering with that demonstration. And what Masculine had done was prove that radio was not secure, or nowhere near as secure as Marconi had been claiming it was. Not only could you intercept messages, you could also interfere with them and pretend to be someone else. It was pretty much one of the first successful hacking attempts, and one which demonstrated the insecurity of a system pretty much for the public good. Marconi and his employees were pretty wild about it, but actually the newspapers came down on the side of Masculine and his hack and said, actually, he's done us He's done us a favour. We now know that if we're going to send telegrams wirelessly, that they can be widely read. So he did us a favour, as some of the hackers of today do when they show up holes in systems.
Germans would set up the Enigma every day by putting different rotors in the machine, replugging the plug board. There's a few other things, all of which would be listed on the key list.
I mean, World War II was essentially a 5-year hackathon. I mean, there's never been a hackathon like World War II where everyone who had any technical skills, and even people who learned technical skills very quickly, got together and solved things like radar were both invented and executed in such a short period of time in such sort of improvised laboratories. So after the war, this just sort of kept going and transferred to the computing.
The original hacker culture from the 50s and 60s was mainly MIT, and then Richard Stallman launched Copyleft, which was a way of publishing work with little or no copyright attached to it, so it could be reused. But the bit that is interesting for me is what happened in Europe when the Amsterdam cultural scene took that on. And I think here's where it starts permeating into culture and being used as social change this side of the world.
So like Culture Hack, we run independently, we're not funded, we're kind of doing it because we feel really passionate about what we're doing. And by that, the people that we work with to produce them, like the delivery partners, need to also have the same values around that as well.
It looked like a really interesting opportunity for sort of technologists and artists to work together, which is actually quite a lovely privilege.
The Culture Hack came out of looking at all the days and the interesting prototypes that were happening, mostly coming out of the Science Hack the day, the Music Hack, probably kind of 2-3 years ago. And at the time when I started it, I was working as head of digital at the Royal Opera House, and it looked like a good idea to start opening up the data and running an event.
Artists kind of see the world in a slightly different way, and that's why sometimes when I'm struggling with a technical problem, one of the best things for me to go is to go to an art gallery or look at an art book or something like that, because it doesn't necessarily inspire you directly, but it helps you think differently.
What we're looking to do for our next event, which is Culture Hack East in April, is actually start to definitely bring more artists, writers, the theatre makers in too, and properly have like a mixed group where you might have a developer, a designer, an actor, I don't know, and to start actually kind of really getting to the heart of the data.
One of my favourite hack days was the first Rewired State, which I thought was lovely. It was a lot of us coming together, playing with government data, playing with government services, without any thought for why we were doing it or any brief at all, apart from the idea that we could do better. And so there was a lot of sort of camaraderie there. It was very good socially. There was a lot of hard work as well, but it was fun, and it wasn't directed. I think that was the key. It was sort of very much what could you make? Nobody sort of said, I'd like to focus on that problem over there. I mean, in essence, the problem was how could you do better than government IT? But considering how parlous government IT was at that stage, that was actually quite a wide brief, so you could pretty much do anything.
So in March 2009, we ran an event called National Hack the Government Day with government. It was with their blessing.
Scalability test. Can you build a website that runs the country? So that's a pretty good scalability test right there.
Whilst we were talking a lot about social media, we were also talking a lot about open data. And it always came back to data, and it always came back to information, and actually that dissemination of information was what we were really talking about when we were talking about digital engagement. And government was wary of opening its data because there was some misunderstanding about what that actually meant. Does it mean that if we open our data, that developers are going to be able to somehow squirrel into government and be able to get hold of all of these government secrets?
I had no idea that I'd end up working for government. That was kind of an unexpected consequence.
We then started working with individual departments who were saying, you know, what data might be useful, what could you use? And then from that went into the private sector. More private sector people were coming and saying, can you run a hack day for us? And so it sort of grew from there. And then in 2010, it actually became an organisation, and we started working on it more full-time, and now we work on it full-time. The business model is basically that we charge for commercial hack days that we run, and for those kind of hack days, IP is transferred to the client, and the clients use that for research and development purposes, or marketing, or testing products. So those are paid, and then we're not for profit, so any money that's left out of that goes into Young Rewired State. Young Rewired State came out of the fact that at National Hack the Government Day in 2009 there was nobody there aged under 25 really, apart from James Darling, who was one of the organisers, and he was 17, and he was certainly, you know, he was on his own. Don't get me wrong, this is still something that is very much grassroots. This is still just stirring. But I think that living in the digital world that they all live in, and growing up with this assumption, they grow up with an assumption of open data for a start, but also an assumption that their digital lives and their analogue lives, if you like, are completely interspersed. And where they have very little control over their digital lives, where they're just consumers of digital products, I think that frustration leads them to wanting to learn how they can break and remake their digital world so that it fits in the same way that they have choices in the analogue world, that they can put those choices into the digital world too. So if they find an opportunity, if they find a way to be able to go in and to rebuild, remake, make something work for them, if it's creating a new email system that means they're not just at the mercy of Gmail, they'll do it. And that to them just seems completely natural. So I think it's not so much about trend, and it's not so much about it being the new thing to do. I think it's just an assumption that the world should work that way. And so they go and find a way to make the world that way. With regards to young UK developers being invited over to Silicon Valley and encouraged to go over there to program, I think that's just because the entrepreneur system and Y Combinator and things like that, those programs are established out there, and they want young British talent because they know that they're good and they're keen and they're hungry.
I think there's a few things that are going to be really interesting to watch. First, I think the spread of fabrication by individuals is huge to watch. Not just the 3D printers, but it's as interesting to watch what's going on with home brewing as it is with 3D printers, right? Because at some point those two start to merge, because at some point you don't just use plastics, you need to be able to make plastics. And you know, what better place to do that than cooking it up?
Now it's, you know, if you don't have an API, you're probably going to get left behind.
If we put on every hack that we were asked to, we would do one every week, maybe more, all over the world.
So I've always thought that 2012 was the year of the nerd.
You know, you've got TV, you've got music, you've got you know, live events, all of this stuff. They've all got their own hack days.
The fact that there's so many hack days happening now, we're kind of really aware that there's only a certain amount of goodwill and a certain amount of appetite. How can we keep evolving the format to make it continue to be interesting?
A good hack is like making an omelette. In many ways, that you can make it with loads of different things, but and it doesn't necessarily look the nicest, but it still tastes great no matter what you put into it. What a weird analogy.
I love that. Let's go on Twitter in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.